James Barrow was a white plantation owner who had thousands of acres of land. And on that land, he had hundreds of slaves. He was a great-great-grandfather of Joe Louis Barrow's father. And the great-grandfather of Anthony Barrow had married Ann Barrow, and they were both slaves. Lon Barrow was a grandfather. He would marry Victoria Hart, who would become Victoria Hart Barrow. She was a grandmother on Joseph Louis Barrow's grandfather's side. Now, Joseph Louis Barrow would have a father named Mum Barrow. He would marry Lillian Reese, who would become Lillian Reese Barrow. That would be Joseph Louis Barrow's mother. But on his mother's side, Charles Hunterfoot was a full-blooded Cherokee Indian. And he would produce James Hart. And James Hart was half white and half Indian. Became a wealthy slave owner. And he would produce Susan Hart. Susan Hart would produce Victoria Hart. And Lon Barrow would marry Victoria Hart, who would become Victoria Hart Barrow. And they would produce Mum Barrow, who would be the father of Joseph Louis Barrows. And Mum Barrow would have 4 other children. He would have a total of 8. But Joseph Louis Barrow was the only biological child that was produced from Mum Barrow and Lily Reese. Joseph Louis Barrow was born May 13, 1914, Chambers County, Lafayette, Alabama. He would reside in Detroit, Michigan. Joseph Louis Barrow would die April 12, 1981. Las Vegas, Nevada. He stood 6 foot 1 inch, weighed 188 to 218 pounds, had a 76-inch reach. He was managed by John Roxborough. Julian Black, 1934, 1949. And he would be trained, one of the greatest trainers, an outstanding fighter. And it was Jack Charlie Chappie Blackburn. Joseph Louis Barrow will have a fighting record, 69 total bouts, 66 wins, 3 losses, 52 by the knockout route. He was only stopped twice, 1936, 1951. Now, Joe's father, Mum Barrow, was a cotton picker from Alabama. His family fought poverty for most of his childhood. But the most that Joe Louis Barrow can remember of his dad, he was between 3 and 5 years old. Because Mum Barrow would be put in asylum. He would have mental issues. Joe would be placed in a school for children who had trouble learning. And it was there where he met his childhood friend, Thurston McKinley. They would be walking past Brewster's Center. And Thurston would pull out of his back pocket a newspaper. And it stated, Kid Chocolate wins $75,000. And that's quite interesting. Because you had a young man named Medley Jackson who, when working on a railroad, a same article would hit him on the side of the leg and give him the same message. Now, Joe's mom remained a married woman because she remarried to Patrick Brooks, who had 5 children of his own. And Joe was one of 8 children from his original dad, Mom Burroughs. Joe would now live at home with 13 children. Patrick Brooks relocated his new family of 13 children and his new wife to Detroit, Michigan, 1927. 6 million black moved from the South between 1916 and 1917, between the Midwest and the North for a better life. And the family was split up, and they would move between Madison and Mullet Street. Patrick Brooks became a street sweeper. Joe and his younger sisters went to Duffield Elementary School. The older boys worked at Ford Motor Factory. And Joe had problems learning in school. He was 12 years old in the 3rd grade. And at that point, he was close to 6 foot at that time. So he then went to vocational school and learned how to make furniture. In 1929, the stock market would crash. 15 million unemployed, they called it Black Tuesday. Now, in 1927, that was the same year, Jack Dempsey would be involved in a famous lawn count with Gene Tunney, Soldiers Field, in Chicago. Who would ever think a young man from Alabama on that date of 1927, just 10 years later, would become the world heavyweight champion, only the 2nd black fighter to do so. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, and I would love to talk about Joe Louis, get into his career, because he's a pulverizing figure. One of the most proud moments of a black family would be listening to the radio of a Joe Louis fight. Let's talk about Joe Louis right here on a Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. When Joseph and his best friend, Freddie Gord, both were delivering ice for a wagon company. And for weeks, they worked at a vegetable market. And then they would go to Charlene Theater. Now, Freddie George could hang out with no white students. Freddie was told by his white teacher that if you stay in your place, I would connect you with a shoe shine section of a barbershop. And you could earn decent money. Your family are accustomed to that. You see, his family worked in the fields picking cotton. And those kind of comments were never questioned. Not 1920s and 1930s. And you had the Purple Gang. They were known for bootlegging in Detroit. You see, Detroit was ran by Al Capone. And Detroit became a violent place. When Joe was 17 years old, Mrs. Brooks signed him up for violin lessons between Warren Avenue and Wick Avenue. And Joe Louis was placed at Boston Vocational School. And this is where he would meet his friend Thurston McKinley. He was introduced to Athletic Club, 1932. It was named Brewster Center. McKinley won Chicago's Golden Glove and a championship title. Now, Joe Louis would go through a lot in his day. In 1934, he would turn professional after he was running through the Golden Gloves in Chicago and Detroit. He would face a fighter by the name of Jack Cracklin, Chicago, Illinois. It's at the Beacons Arena, July 4th, 1934. And Cracklin stood 6'2". He had a fighting career record of 29-9 and 24 knockouts. And Louis earned $50. And he got rid of Cracklin in one round. He was refereed by Davy Miller. Shook his head and said, "I've never seen anything like this." He would face Willie Davis in Chicago, the Beacon Arena, on a Thursday night, July 12th, 1934. And Davy Miller, once again, would shake his head. Because Joseph Louis Barrow would get rid of Willie Davis in 3 rounds. And this time, Joseph Louis Barrow would earn $60. July 30th, 1934. He would face Larry Udell. This time it was at the Marigold Gardens, an outdoor arena. But he would stop him in 2 rounds. At this point, Joe Louis was 20 years of age. And Udell was 27 years of age. But he would earn $75. Jack Crane's, Chicago, Illinois, Marigold Garden, outdoor arena. Louis would earn $125. And he would be very proud to send that money back home. And $125 did a lot in 1934. Put food on the table, clothes on the backs, and shoes on the feet of his family. August 27th, 1934, Joseph Louis Barrow will face Buck Everett, Chicago, Illinois, Marigold Gardens, outdoor arena. And he would earn $150. September 11th, 1934, on a Tuesday night, at the Noble Armory in Detroit. 23-1. Joe Louis was 20 years old. Referee was Elmer Slim McCarlin. And Joe Louis would earn $150. Incredible. He would face Al Delaney, who was 18. Louis was 20. Al Delaney had a record of 23-1. Aldorf Witter. Louis would earn $200. Art Sykes. October 24th, 1934. Referee was Davy Miller. Lewis wins 8-round knockout and earns $280. Jack O'Dowd Arena. It was an arena that they called the Gardens, Chicago, October 31st, 1934. Jack O'Dowd had a fighting record of 25-8-2. And Lewis defeated him in 2 rounds. Referee was Elmer Slim McClellan. He was stopped the bout. Lewis would earn $111. Lewis get in the ring with Stanley Parita. November 14th, 1934. Parita had a record of 29-8-1. So on a Wednesday night, November 14th, 1934, Lewis scored an 8-round knockout, earned $300. He was moving up. So much, though, that on November 30th, 1934, he would face Charlie Massara, had a record of 32-9-4. It was at the Coliseum in Chicago on Friday night, and Lewis would win by a 3rd-round knockout. And Lewis would earn $1,100. Now, Charlie Massara is a well-experienced fighter. And Joe Louis was at a dinner much later on in his career. And he spoke about the Charlie Massara fight. And they realized how good Joe Louis was in his prime. Because Joe Louis, at this point in his career, he was knocking out men who had experience. And on December 14th, 1934, on Friday night, Joe Louis would knock out a fighter by the name of Lee Ramage. He was 40-8. He fought him in Chicago, Illinois. He won by a technical knockout in 8 rounds. And Joe threw a beautiful left hook. He earned $2,200. And this is when everyone knew Joe Louis was for real. Because Lee Ramage was from California. And Lee Ramage could fight. He's an outstanding club fighter. And at this point, he caught the attention of Mike Jacobs. Because he would be introduced to Jack Blackburn. And Jack Blackburn would have conversations with Joe Louis. And he told him, if you follow me, you can be heavyweight champion of the world. There's no question about it. I didn't get that shot. And I didn't want you at the very beginning. Because a black man in this day and age would never have an opportunity to fight for any titles. Especially in the heavyweight division. But I think, young man, you have a shot. I'm training a young man in Camden, New Jersey. His name is Joe Walcott. His original name was Almond Raymond Creed. But he doesn't show as much desire as you because he has a family that he has to take care of. But if you show me the commitment, if you show me that you really want to do this, we can go all the way. Joe Louis, as his name would be changed to, had asked Jack Blackburn, what background and experience do you have? Jack Blackburn laughed and said, oh, if I took the time to explain that to you, we'd be here all day. So he told him, I fought Sam Langford 6 times. Joe Gans a number of times. And I can tell you, if you work the jab like Joe Gans, no one will beat you. Well, how do we do that, Mr. Blackburn? We're going to go in the backyard. We're going to hang up a slab of beef. We'll wait an hour and come back. And you'll have plenty of targets to chime. What he meant by that, Joe Louis had to learn how to catch flies. Because that's what was taught to him by Joe Gans. For speed and reflexes, timing and balance. And in a gymnasium, Jack Blackburn would take Joe Louis. He would show him how to jab. Teach him balance. But one thing he always had problems with was keeping Joe Louis's left hand up. Because Joe Louis had broke his clavicle muscle. Fell out of a treehouse at the age of 3. And he always had problems with his left arm. But with the speed and combination of power, Blackburn figured he can get away with it. And Joe Louis would go on and fight fighters such as Nady Brown, March 29, 1935. He'd be at the Olympic Stadium, and Joe would earn $6,589. And he would defeat Nady Brown in 10 rounds. April 12th, on a Friday night, 1935, he would face a Jewish heavyweight out of New Jersey. His name was Roy Laser. Fought him in Chicago. And Joe scores a 3rd round technical knockout. Referee Davey Miller stops the bout. Joe earns $11,212. June 25th, 1935. 82-7. New York Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. Joe Louis would find himself in a ring with the ambling elf, Primo Carnera. Referee was Arthur Donovan. And Primo Carnera had a size 20-foot shoe. He was a giant of a man, weighed close to 280 pounds. Over 90 fights. Now, yes, he was tied to the mob. And yes, a lot of his fights were fixed. But you're looking at a 280-pound man. And Joe Louis would knock out Primo Carnera in the 6th round. And Carnera would break his ankle from the weight of the fall. And that's how powerful Joe Louis was. And that's when they knew they had an opportunity to make a ton of money with Joe Louis. One of the most amazing nights is when Joe Louis knocks out Max Baer, who's a former heavyweight champion. And he knocked him out in 4 rounds. And there you would find a display of one of the most beautiful triple left hooks ever thrown in boxing. Max Baer would state that he never saw a fighter like Joe Louis. Gave him all the credit in the world. Because Joe Louis could punch. Now, Joe Louis would stand here with Jimmy Braddock, and an agreement would be made. 1937. 10% of Joe Louis's earnings would go to the Cinderella Man. The next 10 years of Joe Louis's career. That's where his financial problems would begin. But he would earn a shot at the heavyweight championship of the world. Comiskey Park, Chicago, Illinois. And if successful, would become the second black heavyweight ever to hold that crown. A feat that Sam Langford would never get an opportunity. And Jack Blackburn, his trainer, had always dreamed about. Now, before Joe Louis, you would have fighters such as Sam McVeigh to your right, Jack Johnson to your left. Sam Langford was a colored middleweight, colored heavyweight champion, Mexican, European, and Australian champion. He was one of the greatest fighters of all time. I have him ranked number 1 as the greatest fighter of all time, was Sam Langford. Yeah, Joe Jeanette and Jack Johnson, two fierce heavyweights. You would have Joe Jeanette and Sam McVeigh, who in 1909 in Paris, France, put on one of the most brutal boxing exhibitions in heavyweight history. There was the Black Prince, Peter Jackson. He was the Australian heavyweight champion. Went 61 rounds with gentleman Jim Corbett. Would never be allowed to get a shot at the heavyweight championship crown because John O'Sullivan would draw the color line. Former heavyweight champion, the Boilermaker, Jim Jeffries, would be beaten up pretty badly in 1910 with the current heavyweight champion, Jack Johnson. But Jim Jeffries would never give a black fighter a chance when he was the heavyweight champion. And then there was Harry Wills, the Brown Panther, was cheated out of an opportunity in his prime against Jack Dempsey, Manasseh Moeller, 1924. And last opportunity would be 1926. The last opportunity that Max Schmeling would have at a title would be in 1930 with Jack Sharkey. An unfortunate low blow from the Boston Garb, Jack Sharkey, to Max Schmeling will earn Max Schmeling a heavyweight champion. John O'Sullivan had drew the color line and said, I would never give a black fighter an opportunity at the heavyweight championship division. But then he would lose his title September 7th, in New Orleans, Carnival of Champions, in 1892, over gentleman Jim Corbett, and he'd be knocked out in 21 rounds. Since then, you had Jack Dempsey, the Manasseh Moeller, who became heavyweight champion in 1919 when he knocked out Jess Willard in brutal fashion. He himself would draw the color line, not giving Harry Wills an opportunity or an aging Sam Langford. But Jack Dempsey was a phenomenal champion, phenomenal heavyweight. But he never completed his career because he didn't give a black fighter an opportunity. And that hurt his legacy. Titles would change hands. Philadelphia, 1926. To the Fighting Marine, Gene Tunney. Tunney never gave a black fighter an opportunity at his heavyweight championship belt. Gene Tunney, one of the greatest boxers in boxing history.